kickers win fantasy football championship. So today I'm bringing you my top 15 kickers for week 7 fantasy football. And I will just say this is our first week doing kickers and defensive rankings over here on 4for4. So if you like that, make sure you hit a like, hit a comment, and hit subscribe as well so that we can show that kickers and defenses actually matter for fantasy football. And I recently redid my kicker model, so I am excited to present the results of that this week, heading into week 7 fantasy football. And we started off here on the top of the tier. And in the S tier, it is going to be Brandon Aubrey starting this off. And when we're talking about good old Brandon Aubrey, I just want to kind of highlight and say that I understand it hasn't been the best season for Brandon Aubrey overall for fantasy football. Now, he had a massive outbreak in week 2 versus the Giants where he put up 23 fantasy points. But like the last 3 weeks, 8 fantasy points, 6 fantasy points, and 9 fantasy points. You know, he's had 5, 5, and 3 attempts over the last 3 weeks. The major thing is this Dallas Cowboys team is performing so good. They're scoring so many touchdowns that he's just getting a lot of extra point attempts and just not enough actual field goal attempts. And so for me, I want to be taking a shot on Brandon Aubrey in this matchup versus Washington. I feel like the Washington defense might be able to hold the Dallas Cowboys offense just a little bit more. But the benefit for the Dallas Cowboys offense is that they should be getting CeeDee Lamb back. But I do have Brandon Aubrey sliding in here as my overall number 1 kicker this week. Like I said, Dallas is favored. He's been steady, 2+ fantasy, field goals per game. It's indoors, and like I said, a very high point total in this game. It's a really safe play for Brandon Aubrey, and we all know how accurate he is. Now, my number 2 kicker this week for week 7 fantasy football, it's going to be Cameron Dicker for the Chargers. The Chargers are small hometown favorites with a mid-game total so far projected of 47.5 points. Like we said, Dicker has been super accurate and has super high consistency, and that's kind of the main reason that you kind of keep him here. When we look at what just happened versus Miami with 17 fantasy points, had 5 field goals, and he had 4 in that 30 to 39 range, and you got to love it, plus the 2 overall extra point attempts. And so we know that this offense is going to score plenty, but if they do stall out, they are typically in that red zone area. And so going up against Indianapolis this next week, we're projecting that's going to be a high scoring game because both of these offenses have been super electric. Got Cameron Dicker here in number 2, Dicker the kicker sliding in as number 2 in my kicker rankings. Overall kicker is going to be Harrison Butker for the Chiefs. The Chiefs are minus 10.5 favorites. It's a massive game script, and I'm projecting extra fantasy points for Harrison Butker, extra field goals, and extra point attempts. Now, Butker has not been his usual self. He's only the number 13 kicker on the season so far. The last 3 weeks, he's been in single digits. The last 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago versus Baltimore, he did barely eclipse the double-digit mark. The part for me is this matchup super good. I just need to see more accuracy out of Harrison Butker. You add in Rashee Rice in this offense, I just think they're going to have plenty of opportunities. They are always in the red zone. The only downside to Harrison is they usually end up scoring a touchdown. And so that's just kind of what making me put him below Dicker and Brandon Aubrey. But I do have him here in the S tier this week as a top 3 kicker this week. Now, moving on into the A tier, we got 3 more guys. We got Chase McLaughlin for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really, this is the thing. Tampa's offense has been super good. Baker is playing at an absolute elite level. This last week, we saw him only have 2 field goal attempts, though. I just think we need this offense to stall out more in the red zone. They've been pretty efficient, especially with the way that Emeka Egbuka has been playing. But kind of what I talked about in the defensive rankings videos with no Emeka Egbuka, assuming no Mike Evans because Mike Evans hasn't been practicing, no Chris Godwin, this team is going to be pretty much just relying on Sterling Shepard, relying on Tez Johnson to kind of move the ball up and down. And so that's going to give Chase McLaughlin hopefully a lot of opportunities kind of early on in the red zone to take advantage of. And so going up against Detroit, they're going to have to score points no matter if it's a field goal or a touchdown. And so I just think it's going to be a really good matchup here for Chase McLaughlin, even though I think this offense is going to be kind of batting at a little bit less than ideal. Number 5 overall kicker this week is going to be Chris Boswell going up against Cincinnati. Steelers need to be able to move the ball enough to really stay in that midfield range for Chris Boswell, who comes off a great game versus Cleveland with 14 fantasy points. And this is kind of the typical Aaron Rodgers offense. The only thing, this could have even been a better day in week 6. Chris Boswell actually missed a pretty long field goal. So like I said, he hit a 44, 50, and 48 yards. So if he's getting in that, like we said, that top end 40s, bottom end 50s, he's going to be able to put up those double-digit fantasy football days for us in that kicker position. Like I said, this Cincinnati matchup, it's an in-division matchup. So like I said, weather could definitely be a factor, but I just had to put him here because of, I think the efficiency is going to be there, but potentially a little bit of weather concerns. And if Joe Flacco kind of starts cooking like he was cooking in the second half, this could end up being a little bit higher of a scoring point total game than we're expecting. And then my last guy here in tier 2, in tier A, is going to be Matt Gay versus Dallas. Like we said, this could be a high scoring game. And so we could see plenty of field goal opportunities for Matt Gay, who right now is sliding in 9 fantasy points in week 5 versus the Chargers. We'll have to see what he does in week 6. I'll be completely honest. I'm recording this on Monday before the Monday night games so that I can get this out to you guys by Tuesday. I like Matt Gay. I think he's going to have probably a pretty good day versus Chicago. And so going up against a Dallas Cowboys matchup where they're going to have to score a ton of fantasy points, we're hoping and expecting Jane Daniels to be a little bit more healthy. Maybe we get a Terry McLaurin sighting, but even still, Daniels and Deebo Samuel have been performing really good to make me confident in the opportunities where we're looking at Matt Gay, who's getting somewhere between 3 to 4 opportunities a game in field goals, which is enough to put up a very solid and a modest fantasy football total. Now, moving on here into my B tier, I call these like reliable kickers, but also a little bit matchup dependent this week. We started off with player number 7, my kicker number 7. It's going to be Kami Fairbairn, Mr. Kami. He's reliable as ever, but this week they are playing at Seattle. So you're always a little bit worried about that Seattle weather and what that could potentially have for his day. But he put up 18 fantasy points in week 5 before the bye. He's a guy that was performing, like we said, as a top 10 kicker before the bye. And so going up against Seattle, we're assuming that they're going to have to throw the ball. The biggest worry that I have is that Seattle's defense is super strong. That front 7 is super strong. So are the Houston Texans going to be actually able to even move the ball into that kind of really good range? Now, the argument that I would have is I think that defense is good enough to kind of limit overall touchdown upside. If you look at the overall points per game and you look at the overall game model for this game, the over-under is very, very, very good, where you would think maybe there's a little bit more upside here for Kami, and that's kind of been his calling card for this team. But like I said, I'm a little bit just worried about this overall defense more than I typically am. Now we move on to my player number 8, Eddie Pinheiro. Definitely won some people their weeks. He won me some weeks this last week in week 6 fantasy football. And so going into this week, you got to be really, 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 really excited for Mr. Eddie as they are taking on Atlanta. And coming off a 20-point explosion like that, it's kind of hard for us all the time to be like, yep, this is going to be another absolutely electric day. But we have seen the Atlanta Falcons offense kind of start to take some steps with Drake London, with Bijan Robinson. So hopefully with that, plus the fact that George Kittle should be back for the 49ers, makes it with a 45.5 game total, makes it an interesting line for the 49ers. Like I said, I feel like the offense is providing, even with Mac Jones under center, is providing enough opportunities. Just like I said, this is going to be really game script dependent, and we saw an absolutely great game script for Eddie in week 6. Let's hope for the same thing in week 7 fantasy football. My number 9 overall player here in this tier, it is going to be Michael Bagley for the Indianapolis Colts, and really just RIP, rest in peace to Schrader. Like I said, he absolutely was electric for us through those first 4 weeks. But now, like I said, this is a game where it's -1.5, 48.5 point total. It's outdoors in the SoFi Stadium. It's got that indoor feel, though. Like I said, it's a revenge narrative for him, and I don't think enough people are going to be talking about this just because he's going up against his old team. And we saw him in this first week with the Colts only put up 8 fantasy points versus Arizona. Like I said, though, he was perfect, though. Made all of his field goals in this win. And the same thing that we kind of talk about when some of these elite level offenses, the Indianapolis Colts are absolutely playing like an elite level offense. And so you definitely want to be taking a shot on Michael Bagley. I don't think he has the same level, maybe consistency and leg as Schrader, but if they do give him in those opportunities in that 30 to 40 yard range, I do expect him to hit. Next guy in this tier, it's going to be Jake Bates. And Jake Bates for Detroit put up 5 fantasy points, and he hasn't hit double digits since week 4 versus Cleveland. But this matchup versus Tampa Bay, like I said, he's been pretty accurate, though. He's been pretty perfect in his overall shootouts. a 52.5-point game. So like this is going to be a super high scoring game. It's in a dome. It's at Detroit. So like I said, high total points game. He's got a strong extra point floor for him. And like I said, if he could add some of those field goals, if Tampa's defense can hold the Detroit Lions offense, which like I said, I'm a little bit worried that the Tampa Bay offense is going to put the defense in some bad spots that maybe make this game a little more like touchdown dependent and maybe not as many opportunities for Jake Bates. But you have to have him here with that point total being so high as a top 10 kicker. Now, I'll quickly give you my like next 5 guys in my C tier. We're going to go with Cam Little. And literally Cam Little has not done absolute jack squat since he absolutely destroyed and kicked so well in the preseason. Put up -2 fantasy points versus Seattle. But like I said, he missed both those kicks. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. But like we said, 55.5-point game. It's a juicy enough scoring range that there should be some volume for Cam Little. So I'm going to forgive and forget because we do know he has the leg. But keep in mind, if he has another game like he just had, you're probably going to have to drop him. Number 12 is going to be Josh Carty versus Jacksonville. Like I said, another outdoor game, same game, 45.5-point game. It's really the same discussion that's happening with Little. Both are viable. I just think Carty has a little bit lower of a floor, especially considering the fact that we don't know what's happening with Puka Nacua. And we haven't seen Carty get over double-digit fantasy points since week 4 versus the Colts. So hopefully this could be another matchup. Like I said, kicker rankings are always a little bit hard as you're kind of doing it with the model. And I think a lot of people are going to ask, Caleb, what's part of your model? I do point total. I talk through whether it's indoor, outdoor, whether it's a home game versus away game, what their fantasy points have been so far this season, what their accuracy has been so far this season. And I kind of have a little bit of a model on the back end that takes all that into account. I wish I was good at algebra, but I'm not. But I have made this model, and that is what I'm relying on here to kind of give these rankings. My number 13 kicker is going to be Jake Elliott versus Minnesota. It's a 42.5-point game where the Eagles are -1.5 favorites. It's a dome. It's a low total overall because these defenses are very good. But I do think he's playable, but I would prefer to go in a different option this week if I can. Number 14 is going to be Will Reichert versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Same kind of thing. I think this game script favors some scoring drives, and honestly, maybe you could make the argument that Will Reichert should be ahead of Jake Elliott. I think he's had good accuracy and been pretty good in the environment. The high-end upside just hasn't been there. And then my last and final kicker is going to be number 15, Jason Myers for Seattle. -3.5. Seattle is favored. It's outdoors, 41.5. I'm a little bit worried about weather. Like I said, I think it caps the overall ceiling, how far he's going to kick the ball. But I do think there's a super safe floor with the way that Sam Darnold and JSN has been playing overall. So if you like fantasy football, if you like kicker rankings, make sure you hit a like, leave a comment, as I want to be putting these videos out for you more weekly so that you can get your lineups right with defense and kickers. But we got to show the people above that these videos are helpful for you. So make sure you hit that like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.